Welcome to the new Cyber Frontier, bringing you the latest news on the local Colorado economy and initiatives that focus on the development of cybersecurity economics. You don't have to be a computer or cybersecurity expert to get plugged in. Your host, Chris Gorog, brings it straightforward, asks the tough questions, and brings the cyber world to a level of understanding for everyone. Chris is personable and opens up with our guests on issues we all would like to see addressed. You can find us on the web at www.newcyberfrontier.com. Now join our host as he introduces the topic for today's new Cyber Frontier.
Good morning, this is Abe Thompson. I'm your host here on the new Cyber Frontier, standing in for my good friend Chris Gorog, your eminent host of the greatest cybersecurity podcast out there. We are this morning recording from the SecureSet campus here in Colorado Springs. SecureSet is a cybersecurity training academy that provides a boot camp format to get folks out there and address some of the workforce issues in cybersecurity. This morning I have the privilege of meeting with and chatting with our friend Mr. John Falese. Good morning, John.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Well, happy Pi Day. I know this might air on a different day, but you can't go without saying that, especially with a bunch of geeks in the room. Yes, you've got your recognition. He's got his Raspberry Pi right there. That's beautiful. John, where are you coming from?
So I'm here in the Springs. I've been here. I got stationed at Fort Carson in 1986. So although I'm from New York, I still have been here for quite some time.
Yeah, I hear a bit of New York in there.
Yeah, I try not to let it come out too much.
Sure enough. Excellent. Yeah, I lived at Fort Carson myself. A lot of nostalgia, a lot of connections there. My dad was an Army guy. Hua indeed. So one of the things we like to do here on the new Cyber Frontier is address those cutting edge issues across the cybersecurity spectrum, whether they be technical, political, or anything in between that relates to the subculture and the economy surrounding cybersecurity. And we like to sort of ask our guests to bring forward some of the things that are burning on their heart and mind. And I understand you have a concern that you'd like to kind of address and talk to us a little bit about. And what is that, John?
Absolutely. So I had the privilege of attending the 2018 Rocky Mountain Cyberspace Symposium here held at the Broadmoor. Wonderful location. A little plug for the Broadmoor. I don't work for the Broadmoor, but anyway, a little plug for the Broadmoor.
It's
but
a beaut.
It is very nice. I've been going ever since it started. I've only missed a few years because I wasn't here in the Springs at the time. And I tell you this, I got a lot of great swag, which is one of the reasons why we all go, because the vendors have a lot of little trinkets that they want to give out. But I got a good sense of where the industry kind of is going and what they had put out, the information that they had put out. A lot of the speakers wanted to present their views. I managed to utilize this space as sort of a informational training ground for myself. I go to the symposium and I gather intel about where the industry is going and what everyone wants to say. And unfortunately, but true, they're going nowhere. Nowhere special, and it doesn't really seem like anyone's going forward. So I don't mean to strike a dour tone on what transpired, but I wrote in my notes, tell me something I don't know. I mean, a lot of the speakers were just kind of rehashing, and I was hoping to hear a lot more. They ended up just being kind of talking heads, and I want to hear a little bit more about initiatives and directions, concise directions, and where we need to move towards and how we need to solve our cybersecurity dilemma.
Sure.
Because it is quite a dilemma.
I can imagine our listeners are out there, especially our AFCEA friends, and they're going to say, well, who are you to say? And what would your response be?
So I consider myself a good observer.
Mm-hmm.
I am Chief Warrant Officer in the United States military, which we are highly specialized experts in our field and trainers. And I come from a basis of being in the industry for quite some time. So, and I have seen the trend over decades of where this cyberspace paradigm situation that we find ourselves in, and how it's moving, how it's progressing, how it's developing, and how it's moving forward.
Sure.
So I don't claim to be a cyber expert, but I consider myself an observer.
Sure enough, and as we know, warrant officers have been around for a little bit more than 5 minutes for sure. You know, ideally, when we created those in our Department of Defense, the idea was we would promote our technical experts so that they could be our technical advisors and experts, and not just another quote-unquote junior or company grade type officer. And so
Exactly.
I definitely recognize
Or field
and see
grade
that.
in my case.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, exactly. Given your time, and so you see this issue where apparently we're going nowhere. Did you see a lot of energy where there were a whole bunch of folks, a lot of energy running in different directions, or is it literally at a standstill?
So it's difficult. It's difficult to kind of gauge because there's a lot of moving parts. One of the things that is ubiquitous amongst everyone is we all agree that the threat is relentless. But that's a mantra that they keep saying. We have breaches, new breaches every day. We need better, insert your current cyber factoid fear factor thing. We need better whatever. We need to do something better. But it just doesn't seem like there's any major progress. So Tom Ridge, former Secretary of Homeland Security, like he inserted his little factoid fear factor, which was AI. And how AI is, as in his words, is the third most potential weapon system being developed. So that's kind of how I see it as. It's just, where do we insert the little...
Sure. Definitely an interesting point, and then we'll get back to some of Secretary Ridge's comments in a moment after we hear from our sponsor.
We'll be right back with the rest of today's show right after these brief messages from our sponsors. Cyber Resilience Institute helps build strong cyber communities designed to prevent members from attack. Like building a neighborhood watch, it takes coordination and a sharing community to protect our identities and valuables in the virtual world. Typically, we hear that organizations know they need to do something to protect their cyber assets, but don't know where to begin. Let Cyber Resilience Institute help your community create an action plan. Cyber Resilience Institute will build your community or business marketplace so that it is designed to support a collective cyber defense. Contact them for more information at cyberresilienceinstitute.org.
All right, and we're back here at the new Cyber Frontier, recording from the Secure Set Academy here in Colorado Springs. My guest is Mr. John Falese. He's sharing with us some of his observations from the most recent Rocky Mountain Cyberspace Symposium there at the Broadmoor Hotel. You used some pretty powerful images to talk about sort of the quote-unquote fear-mongering that you heard at the symposium. Comments like the threat is relentless, and you really kind of identified it as still a lack of progress. You mentioned Tom Ridge, former Secretary of Homeland Security, and his discussion of AI as the third greatest threat. Can you unpack that a little bit for us?
Well, I'm not an AI expert.
Sure.
And that's the problem. What I know about AI and what they're developing in AI is probably, you could fill a thimble full. I'm sure that he was alluding to a much greater threat vector that's being leveraged by AI. AI can be used as a tool for analytics, for beneficial purposes, but obviously it's a double-edged sword, and they can use AI for nefarious activities.
Sure. I'm
not privy to that, but he alluded to that in a kind of factoid, getting people moving forward about their anxieties and what to do. Clearly, we are in a perpetual cyber war. I call it the PCW. This is not going away. This is not a war that just gets won. This is a battle, a succession of battles that we have to continually fight and continually adjust our tactics to address the continuing and shifting sands of the battlefield. our adversaries don't face our current legislative, political, moral, or ethical challenges that we do, so they're unfeathered by how they approach it. So that means that the battlefield is always dynamic. Nor are they unable to or reluctant to commit. Well, our challenge here is that I see that we are unable and reluctant to commit to commit money or people or resources like our adversaries are. They are just, regardless of whether they're state or they're non-GOs or criminal activities, they're willing to commit all the way in pushing forward their activities, where we are hampered by bureaucratical progressy. So we have to overcome that.
And in some ways, probably wouldn't want to say hampered, but inhibited from a free scope of action, given the fact that we actually possess a conscience.
Yes, exactly.
And I have no problem making that bold statement about our soulless adversaries.
And that's true. So it's difficult because we have to move forward methodically and purposely, but we still have to move forward with due diligence and effort. So okay. It's a balance.
So you talk about moving forward in due diligence and effort, and so we're in this perpetual cyber war. You're challenging the folks at the RMCS to make something of that opportunity. So what do we do?
So we have to address, they speak a lot about the elephant in the room, and the elephant in the room is that there's millions of unfulfilled cybersecurity jobs and positions. Why? We know we have to get serious. We have to get past our lethargy and put the mechanisms in place, because we have to get that next gen involved, that next generation involved, because old guys like myself, we have a good, few more decades to go, but my shelf life is shorter than those coming up behind me, and we need to get them trained up much faster. Sure. Yes, there's a lot of efforts, but we really have to get serious about that. I don't mean to just say, oh, we need to get people trained up. We really need to look at that next generation. A lot of individuals coming here to SecureSet, which I know personally, the demographics are within that scope for putting people immediately into jobs. Yeah. But we have to look at the younger ones that are coming up in the queue, and so I see a lackluster approach to that. It's just not getting enough traction.
Sure, and the pockets of what you're talking about do exist with Cyber Patriot and those things, but it's that attempt to coalesce and codify something like that. I look at the European system, and particularly in the United Kingdom, they have their what we would call high school education, which ends at about 16, and then you go into a very specific track. And one of those tracks, for instance, is the Army Foundation College. At 16 years old, between 16 and 18, they're training in every aspect of serving in warfare, except for handling the weapons. Right? So they've taken a very serious approach to this. It's quite a grand event. I stood in as the Navy representative at one of their graduations, and it's a recognition of that. Get it done early now and get you on the right trajectory. What do you see in that type of solution?
This is probably the most radical solution in regards to that, and that would be to form a conscript cybersecurity force.
Interesting.
So, Europe, as you mentioned, they have conscript armies. You serve your 2 years, and then you've done your duty as a citizen of that nation. I think that we need to ensure. And again, this is a radical concept. The conscript cyber force is radical.
I'm envisioning people out burning their cyber draft cards.
Right now as we speak.
We shall overcome.
I know, right, exactly. I'm starting the new anti-movement now. But, if we look at our next generation, and I'm not trying to bash the next generation coming up, but they're the ones who are enforcing or pushing for that 5-day work week because they just don't want to work the weekends. This is a relentless rust never sleeps paradigm with cybersecurity. We cannot take oh, I'm just going to work a few days a week attitude and make progress. We have to enlist and engage with those individuals, young individuals who are coming up, and hopefully develop a larger community, if you will. And whether it's volunteer or conscript, we still need to get out there and get the younger kids.
And it's not so radical. You're actually advocating a return to the principles that built this country.
Exactly.
The ingenuity, the entrepreneurial spirit, the diligence, the grit, and the elbow grease. I can certainly appreciate that.
And we need this because we need a more aggressive DoD private solution, because our adversaries are doing just that.
And then some.
And then some.
Sure. And so, you've hit on a facet of the industry that's very important to Chris Gorog and myself in terms of addressing the workforce issues. Of course, at SecureSet, we focus and have picked as a niche that entry-level cybersecurity professional, and that's where we're operating. But it's interesting, the various events that we have, like the Capture the Flag events. The high schoolers come in droves and they embarrass the rest of us adults. They run circles around us. So they have that affinity already built in. And so what you're talking about is nurturing that already existing skill and bringing into it a component of the maturity and the stick-to-itiveness, to use a very technical term.
Yeah, exactly. I love that stick-to-itiveness. That you are identifying that demographic. So truly.
Excellent. Well, let's take a break here and hear from our sponsors here at the New Cyber Frontier.
We'll be right back with the rest of today's show right after these brief messages from our sponsors. Over 3 million data breaches happen every single day. That's over 2,000 records being compromised every minute. So often, we focus on securing web data access. But what if the attackers are already inside, having gained direct access to your storage through data management software? When it comes to communications that go directly into your storage devices, make SNIA your first line of protection. SNIA's conformance testing limits outdated communications that are known to be used by attackers. It works continuously behind the background to make sure your storage is protected. To find out if your data is truly secure, visit our website at www.snia.org/cybertest.
And we're back here at the New Cyber Frontier. This is Abe Thompson, your host here at SecureSet Academy here in Colorado Springs with our guest, Mr. John Falese. You had mentioned in terms of a solution for this need to bring in the next generation of cyber professionals in a meaningful way, not sort of the maybe lethargic or lackluster approach you've observed thus far. You talked about a DoD private solution. Can you unpack that a little bit for us?
Sure. I see that there are two separate tracks. Obviously, DoD is the Department of Defense has their mission and has their direction, which is sometimes in line with private sector, but not always.
Sure.
It's blatantly obvious what DoD has to do and what their mission statement is. I'd like to talk a little bit more about the private side and what they need to do. Again, it's the seriousness of the situation. I think I see a lot of businesses not really taking cybersecurity as serious as they need to until something happens.
Sure.
And I get it, a business has to stay focused on what they do, and sometimes cybersecurity is like, well, I just make cookies here at the on the corner. We're a cookie shop. What do we care? And we know that PCI and if you're taking credit cards to sell your cookies, that information has to be secure. How you manage that information has to be secure. So unfortunately true, businesses tend to have bad business practices when it comes to cybersecurity. And they really need to be aware that it's every business's responsibility to secure that data. And that, I hate to say legislation, because I don't consider politicians to be cybersecurity experts, but
they do. I'm sure.
I'm sure they do. But I hate to see legislation put in place. But sometimes the only way you motivate the business world to get something done correctly is to legislate. I wish they would do it on their own, but the bottom line is this: no matter whatever the catalyst is, we need to get businesses, every business involved, small businesses, large businesses, to ensure that cybersecurity is much more adhered to and understood. I don't know if federal programs might help that, legislation, federal programs, it's a challenge.
Sure.
But I see that as one of the key issues.
Well, and it almost seems there's an advocacy for something that goes beyond just risk management framework, which is already sort of the regulation around framework and policy procedure, but there's a push, it sounds like, to raise the standard, but then also raise the stakes for not adhering to that standard. Absolutely.
I don't think punitive actions on systems admins is required, but I know as a system admin myself that there are lazy systems admins or those that don't believe that they need to have a greater focus on cybersecurity, and they're lagging behind in simple things like patches and updates. I know, or poor programming. So I don't want to harp on sysadmins being the crooks of the problem. There's also poor programming. I understand that a development shop who are developing applications, they want to get their product out there. They want to get it sold. Sometimes in that rush to market, they're not doing diligence to ensure that all the security, all the loopholes that they leave, all the back doors that they leave open in their code are closed. So I think it's an across the boards kind of awareness and adherence to better business practices that really needs to be enacted.
Awareness is always, the most critical starting point, and in reality, system admins at their level compared to maybe where some of the decision makers are that really need to have the awareness and actually the push, there's got to be sort of a middle ground. Who do you think, say you've hung your shingle out there and everybody's asking for your wisdom, we've got your first step is awareness. Who do you think can fill that gap, that it can enhance that awareness if it's not the federal government? Our hope would be that these businesses police themselves, but where does that component of the industry come to life? Who does that?
So, first response is that it's a lasagna effect.
Okay.
It's at multiple layers.
Cyber lasagna. Let me write that down.
There you go. So make it a good meat lasagna, like they make Maggie's.
Mangia.
Va bene. It needs to happen at all levels. The CSO needs to get that equivalent status and the C staff as the CFO or even the CEO. Because that individual is going to drive that policies and procedures, drive it down through the organization. Middle management has to recognize that they are stakeholders in ensuring that those policies and procedures get disseminated correctly and adhered to. And of course, we mentioned the sysadmins and or coders and programmers. It's their responsibility at those low levels to ensure that those are being enacted. They're the ones, that's where the rubber meets the road. So they've got to make sure that it happens. And also in good organizational models, they need to provide the feedback up through the channels of what is working and what's not working.
Okay. Let's play with the analogy a little bit more. So certainly that sounds like the cheese, that melts and kind of holds it all together.
Exactly.
And it kind of gets into all the different layers. That kind of makes sense.
Formaggio.
Beautiful, beautiful. So awareness, steps, what is the sort of the technical readiness that those awareness people need to have?
Well, it's all about knowledge. You know what I'm saying? You're talking about technical acuity. You're talking about their ability to understand what's going on. So now the trainer part of the warrant officer is coming in, and that is ensuring that the individuals are trained correctly. Okay. They're not going to, I shouldn't say this. I will give you an example of those individuals who like to ferret out that information on their own. They're hungry for knowledge, and those individuals are out there searching it and data mining information and incorporating it into what they do. Those are great individuals because they're doing it on their own.
And what you're getting to really is something that I yearn to see, and I do every once in a while see, but probably not enough, is that individual motivation. And I've seen folks come into the industry that have no technical background, but a desire, and they lap that stuff up, they master it, and they're out there and they've gotten some great jobs.
Absolutely. And we want to help those guys because those, or gals, those individuals are going to excel well. They will excel fast. They will move up the ranks accordingly because they have that burning desire. Those that don't have the desire can be trained, you know, and also maybe motivational. How about instilling some of that desire? How about instilling some of the traits that the other individuals have on their own and cultivating that? I know in today's society, motivation for young individuals is all concentric around that mobile world or that gaming world. Leverage that. Leverage those. Leverage the things that they find attractive, you know.
And you're talking about really the medium for that message, because the principles are age old and the principles are the same.
Precisely.
And you're advocating inspirational leadership. You're advocating the same things that we used to always look for in our military folks and the esprit de corps, for instance. And so finding, really, I think we've talked about this on the air before, is the essence of the cybersecurity community and you know, the inspirational leadership and really the value of intangibles in our industry.
Truly, you're absolutely correct. We need to be trained, again, the lasagna effect. Let this be a meat lasagna, not a veggie lasagna, because if you ever eaten a veggie lasagna, so let's ensure that training, that mentorship happens at all levels, and we need to foster that. I see in businesses and in the private sector, businesses aren't necessarily motivated to train the individuals to be better managers, to be better employees. They are islands or oases of businesses that want to do that. Good organizations do that. Average organizations don't, and they need to step that up. And by doing that, they will benefit holistically, but more specifically what we're talking about, it'll be beneficial in that cyber realm.
Well, folks, you've heard it right here, the birth of the Cyber Corps.
There you are, right here.
But you know, I jest a bit, but it sounds like there is a sense for that type of component. So first steps, first real steps.
First real steps, wow, that's a challenge. Because again, you have to attack it at all levels. So it has to be a multi-pronged approach, lasagna layered approach. I think what's going on here right now, which is critical, and that's getting the basic foundation, getting individuals trained up, because we really lack that strong foundation. I don't see an awful lot of management type of training to help managers better, middle management that is, better understand what the requirements are and how to address cybersecurity issues. I don't see a lot of that, and I think that's something that needs to be stepped up. You know, as far as upper level management C staff, you know, once you're a CSO, usually that's because you've been in the industry for a couple of decades and you have that experience, you have that exposure. I think they need to be better enabled, and I'm not sure exactly how that would work.
Sure.
But I think that that's at that top level.
Well, and there's nothing wrong with the very straightforward principle that leadership, in order to be best accountable, does have to have awareness. They also have to pick the right folks and have a great team. Mr. Falese, it's been a pleasure. You've got some passion. I'll certainly try not to give the RMCS folks your address. But no, in fact, I think you give all of us a lot of great things to think about. And I appreciate your time with us this morning and your contribution to the larger industry.
Abe, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the New Cyber Frontier. I'm your host, Abe Thompson, and we're coming to you from the SecureSite Academy campus here in Colorado Springs. And once again, from us here, way back on Pi Day 2018. Wow, 1918, could you imagine? All right, signing off.
The views or opinions expressed during this podcast are not those of Colorado Technical University.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of New Cyber Frontier. Remember to get involved. Often we think that someone else will handle privacy and security in the virtual world, but you are the only one truly in command of your virtual fate. Join our mailing list so we can keep you informed of breaking news and new releases. If you have an idea, if you have a question that you would like to hear answered, or if you want to get involved with our efforts, reach out to us at newcyberfrontier.com. We also encourage you to visit our sponsors' links, as they are the ones that really make this show possible. I want to thank each of you for supporting the show, and we look forward to seeing you back for the next episode of New Cyber Frontier.